Hi, everyone. Welcome again to our usual Wednesdays. We're really excited to have you all join us here today for exploring worker ownership transitions with CF&E. CF&E are one of our closest comrades in this work, and so we're really excited to sort of learn alongside them. To introduce you all, I want to our facilitator today. I'm going to share a little bit about them. Carolyn Edsell-Vetter or Vitar? Oh, Vetter. Oh, I got it right down. Joined the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast in March 2019 as the Cooperative Business Support Officer. They work with Spanish and English speaking borrowers to assess project feasibility and connect with culturally appropriate technical assistance resources. Carolyn came to CF&E after 19 years with a yard and a half landscaping near Boston, Massachusetts, where they led their conversion to where they led a conversion to a worker-owned co-op in 2013 and served as co-CEO from 2014 to 2019. Carolyn serves on the board of Cooperative Development Institute and holds a bachelor's degree in religious studies from Cornell University and an MDiv from Harvard Divinity. Thank you so much for joining us, Carolyn. We're excited to learn alongside you. I'll pass it to you now.
Thanks so much, James, and I'm really excited to be with all of you. I hope some of you were able to catch my colleague Johan and last month doing a session on sort of like Co-op 101. That's up on UGMA's YouTube, so definitely check it out if you missed it. I'm going to do like a brief recap. Yeah, just really honored to be here, honored to have the chance to be in relationship with UGMA, and just really value that relationship in this space. James, I still need you to let me share my screen though.
You should be set now.
Sweet. Make sure I get the right one. Boom. Okay. Don't have to do a check-in, but here are some funny animals. What I think we're talking about today is we'll do a quick review of kind of the Co-op 101 material that that Johan went over last time. We'll talk about why and what is worker ownership, and actually like the how do worker ownership transitions happen. And I'll share some resources and next steps. And I kind of am focusing on business owners, but know that there are a lot of different paths to creating worker-owned businesses. So this definitely can apply to folks working within a business who want to take over from their boss, or people forming new worker-owned businesses. A lot of the same ideas apply, even though this will be more focused on worker-owner transitions. And our focus today is just going to be, how can we create thriving communities through transitions to cooperative enterprise? So, how do we make sure that we retain existing businesses and can convert them to democratically managed businesses? So to review some terms that were used last time, what's a cooperative? It's kind of a jargony term. You might also think of this as a collective or sort of a more formalized mutual aid. But a cooperative at its root is an enterprise that's owned, operated by its members. And it's usually democratically managed and equitably owned, like people have an equitable kind of financial stake in it. Worker-owned cooperative is a co-op whose members are its workers. So all of the employees, or some majority of the employees, actually own the business, and when the business is profitable, they get a share of the profits. They make all the big picture decisions about how the business is run, what its values are, et cetera. And a co-op conversion is when a quote unquote conventional business transfers ownership to its employees. So a lot of the times historically that's happened when the boss has decided to retire. And right now you'll hear people sort of talk about the silver tsunami, or this idea that there are a lot of baby boomers who own businesses who are retiring. And so we're in this period where there's a lot of turnover, and where the model used to be that, oh, my kids will take it, most kids aren't really interested, so that transition to the next generation only happens like a very low percentage of the time. But often the people who know the most about how to run the business and who are really invested in keeping it going are its workers. And so that ends up being a really good option. And it also serves to kind of pass on wealth creation opportunities and professional growth opportunities to folks. And if you think about who are the workers in a lot of businesses, especially a lot of service industry businesses and stuff like landscaping or cleaning or whatever, it's folks of color and immigrants. So we really are interested in worker owned transitions in part because it's a great way to transfer wealth and transfer power from white folks to communities of color and to folks who've been, historically disinvested from and not given access to sort of the mainstream economy. So those of you who got to see Johan, he has this story. He's a Black dude from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and he has this analysis that like there's this myth that Black people don't do co-ops. So he sort of went through and like broke down what does he feel like the barriers are to Black folks doing co-ops or to cooperative enterprise in general. And one of the ones I want to focus on in talking about worker ownership transitions is that the norm is not cooperative. The norm is that there's the single business owner, they have all the headaches. They're like, how the heck am I going to make payroll? And they're in it by themselves, and it can be very lonely and thankless. And then the flip side is that you have a lot of people who don't have access to ownership opportunities. So, we think worker-owned transitions are a way to kind of flip that script. Here's some examples of local businesses that are cooperatively owned and a few national ones. So Boston Building Resources is a consumer-owned buyers co-op. Cero, of which Ujima is an investor, is a compost and recycling co-op that's worker-owned and minority-owned. And then you've got some of the kind of big national, Cabot Cheese is owned by its farmers. Equal Exchange is owned by its workers and also its farmers. So there's some examples of businesses you might be familiar with that are actually member owned. James kind of did a little introduction to me and to CFNE, but we're a nonprofit community loan fund. We've been around since the 1970s. Originally, we were founded because there were all these like food co-ops in the 70s that were coming to Haymarket People's Fund, which is, it's a grassroots fund meant to support grassroots organizing. And there were all these like food security and organic food access co-ops going to them and being like, can you give us a grant? And they looked at them and they're like, you're a business, you should be able to service debt. So Haymarket People's Fund stood up a little bitty loan fund. And over the years that's grown, and we've grown to work with all the different types of cooperatives. So housing, worker, consumer, producer, farmer, land trusts. I'm probably thinking, you're probably missing a few. And we so we provide co-op friendly financing that's about underwriting the business and the group of people who are democratically governing it, not underwriting people based on credit scores or individual assets or any of that junk. And we also want co-ops to succeed. So what my team, the learning team, does is really providing a lot of coaching and business assistance, both to folks thinking about starting up or transitioning to worker ownership, but also to mature co-ops who are just hitting bumps in the road or actually thinking about like how do they transition to that next generation. And of course, most of our investors are individual investors. So we're a great place to invest and know that your money is, getting reinvested in the cooperative economy and not, being used to extract wealth. James alluded to this, but like by way of introduction and also my connection to this topic. So for 19 years before I came to CFNE, I worked for a yard and a half landscaping, and I actually initially connected with CFNE as a borrower. So in 2013, a bunch of us got together and formed a co-op and bought out our boss. And CFNE was the primary source of the loan to make that happen. And as you can see from the picture, most of my coworkers were Central American immigrants. And so a lot of that process was about kind of like doing the linguistic, but also cultural and educational translation of how, going from like, we never imagined ourselves owning a business. We always thought we'd be like probably working in kind of an exploitative industry, to, oh my gosh, we own this thing and we need to like read financial statements and make decisions about whether we can buy a new vehicle and, kind of big stuff like that. It was a very cool project to get to be part of. And I'm happy to say, when we did the conversion, we were about $2 million in sales. And last year, the co-op did $5 million in sales. So they've grown a lot. They've been able to pay off their debt, reinvest. A lot of folks have, sent the first kids in their family to college or bought their first houses or things like that. So I'm a little bit of an evangelist because I've been part of this really working. And I just think it's a really promising model. And I'm also happy to say at the outset, happy to talk to folks. I talk to a lot of people who are just, considering this or trying to learn about it. So my information's at the end, and feel free to hit me up. So throughout today, if you want to, grab your phone and grab this or go to this link, and I think I put it in the chat too, if I can get there. This is just a little workbook that you can either follow along with now for some of the exercises that we're going to be doing, or just use it as a resource afterwards. It's also got, I'm going to tell you about a few free programs that are coming up for learning more about democratic management and transitions to worker ownership. So it's got information about that stuff. So feel free to grab that or get over there if you want. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna play you, if I can, a little video. And somebody just give me a thumbs up if this works and the sound works.
No, I don't hear the sound.
Don't hear the sound. Okay. Dude. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna stop sharing. And I'm gonna try original sound on and see if that helps. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm used to having help. Share sound. Share that screen. Boom. Okay.
Is that every time I leave my house every morning, I tell my girlfriend, 200% every day, 200%. And that's what it takes to be an owner. 200%.
I'm happy that we're achieving the things we set as our goal.
I keep pushing, and I hope to influence other young guys like myself to keep becoming better no matter what.
It's a dream come true to become an owner. It's just good to see that you can work hard and believe in something and see it come to fruition. It doesn't happen often, and it's just good to be a part of it.
Growing up, I always wanted these dreams, but I never necessarily seen them happen close to me. But it just makes me feel even better that we're here now.
Having 6 owners is amazing. Like, we've had the goal of becoming employee ownership for 10 years. As a bond, almost like as we were signing the documents earlier, it's like you just got married. I mean, it feels like you're really part of a team that's connected and with a shared purpose and so forth. So it's a strong feeling. It feels good.
Go. Sorry, you guys, I got it. Shoot. Okay. Now we're rocking. All right. Sorry for the little bumpiness there. So the video there is from Taharka Brothers, which is a co-op conversion in the Baltimore area. And it kind of hits on some of those things I was saying at the beginning in terms of transfer of wealth building opportunities from white folks to folks of color who are the employees. And it also hits on a few other of these points. I want to invite people to just either in that workbook or just on a little sheet of paper, mark down the numbers of any of these statements that you agree with about employee ownership. Need to plan for retirement, want to sell my business at a competitive price, feel like my business is a legacy and I want for it to live on after I retire, want my employees to retain their jobs after I retire, building a more equitable, inclusive workplace, wanting employees to think and act more like owners, retain my best employees and attract new ones, which can be true even if you're not thinking about retirement, and believing that business is best when everyone benefits, including the owner, employees, and community. And if people want to, shout out or put in the chat, like what's the top one or two of these numbers that might resonate for you? And if you're not an owner, that's cool too. Just like which of these grab you as compelling arguments for employee ownership? Number 8. Yes, or that global vision of business is best when everybody benefits. Anybody else? Something I'll say about this is that I get this sense maybe there are not a lot of, 7, retaining the best employees, attracting new ones. Grew up hearing number 1, need to plan for retirement from a parent. Yeah. Knowing that there are not necessarily a lot of folks who are owners on this call, something to say that I think is maybe a missed opportunity that hopefully will be changing as demographics change is that a lot of the times the employee ownership kind of movement tends to start by talking to owners. And because they're thinking of them as the ones who have to be bought in and able to kind of front some of the costs for training up employees and putting in place democratic management and stuff like that. And so I just kind of want to, even though I know a lot of these are sort of employer focused or owner focused, just to highlight this idea that there are actually a lot of employee-owned businesses where they transition because the owner is somebody like my age or younger who's like, I don't want to have all the headaches by myself and I don't want to take all the profits out of the business myself. I want to share, everybody's doing part of making this great, and I want to share both the decision making and also the benefits. So it's, it's really, I think a lot of people see it as like an ethical business model completely aside from kind of the retirement focus. So yeah, funding retirement is one reason, but just growing your business is another major reason. Anything that you're going to do to prepare for a worker ownership transition is going to make your business stronger, regardless of whether you're selling it or not, because you're going to have folks who are more engaged, who understand what's going on. You're going to have more transparency, more communication, more just engagement and like better morale. Also protecting community assets. So, a lot of the times a business may be like the one bodega or hardware store or, whatever in the neighborhood. And you don't want that to go away, and you don't want it to become a chain that's not going to have the neighborhood's best interests at heart. So like maintaining that business's existence can be really important for a community. And then, we talked about building wealth and building ownership for workers. To get more of an idea of like what actually is worker ownership nuts and bolts, I want to share one more quick video. Maybe I'll do a better job this time.
Is essential. I'm planning on becoming one of the owners of a Child's Place. I really believe in the mission statement that a Child's Place has, where they are nurturing and we're a family-run business, and I like that, and I would like to continue that.
Each staff member, teacher and maintenance, nutrition, front desk, administrator, finance, everybody was going to learn all the different parts of the business. And they would all have to make an initial investment, a small investment, but everybody would have skin in the game.
When we introduced this to the staff, one of the first things was, oh, so we can give ourselves a raise. So we said, sure you can. What happens is at the end of the year, we look at all the books, we see what we need, whatever profit was made, and you can take that profit and either buy the things you need for your classroom, or you can give yourself the rest of the money. And so everybody started to think, because these are not things that they normally think about.
It's been nothing but a positive decision. People don't have to worry about losing a job or what's going to happen, that they're seeing a change, but it's all on their behalf. That culture and that mission and the vision still remains.
A co-op is a very, very good option for any business owner, because it allows you to step away with a sign of relief that what you've implanted in whatever community or whatever district or any area that you're in can still survive.
We are part of this community. We've created the kind of family environment and atmosphere because that's how we started.
Most people do not have that opportunity to be a business owner. And this is another way where people in the community can become a business owner.
So yeah, hopefully you heard some of those same themes we were talking about in terms of maintaining a community asset, passing on business ownership opportunities to other folks in the community, really maintaining a sense of the business's values and the original owner's legacy in that story, which is a Child's Place is a conversion of a child care center in Brooklyn. And it also hit on really sort of this definition of what is worker ownership. So you heard about the business is owned by its employees, so they make that initial equity investment and they also share in the risk and reward. So if they're profitable at the end of the year, they decide, do we give ourselves a raise? Do we invest in new stuff for the classrooms? Do we share it out with the community somehow through donations? And also there's that democratic control aspect of participatory management of, you saw people getting together in a meeting and having a conversation about how are we going to do things rather than just one owner saying, this is the plan. One thing that's important to mention, I think people get a little freaked out and hung up about with worker ownership, is that it can be very collectivist, it can be very flat, but also it can be fairly traditional. There's definitely co-ops that have all the members serve on the board, or that have an elected board, and the people who elect the board are the worker owners. So you can do it either way. And same with management. You can have a very flat management structure where it's more of a collective and people rotate through all the jobs, or you can have more of a people have job specializations and you have somebody who does the finances and somebody who schedules the jobs and whatever. So there are as many ways to do a worker co-op as there are worker co-ops. But the big thing is that everyone has the opportunity to take on any role for which they're qualified, and that the co-op really invests in developing them to take on those roles. In terms of how worker ownership transition happens, to sort of overlay on top of this, there's we sort of think of it as like a three-legged stool. So there's the ownership, so there's that equity investment and that shared risk and reward. There's management, so that participatory piece, and then board governance. And it takes really those three pieces. And so when we talk about doing an ownership transition, each of those has to be accomplished. And ideally, you're not doing them all at the same time, but you're really taking time to focus on each one and give it the kind of the time and attention it deserves, because it's stuff that requires some thought. So I'm going to go through each of these legs and just kind of like tease it out a little bit, because one of the things that's hard is that usually all three of those roles just reside in that one owner, and all of this stuff is in their head, which is part of why being an owner can be so crazy making. But also it's why doing a transition from taking all of that stuff from one person's brain and distributing it among a team of people requires just some care. So the first piece is the ownership, and this is what a lot of people think of as the actual transition, because it's like the legal and financial piece. So it's like, we're going to create a new cooperative entity and, give it a new name and register with the Secretary of State. And we're going to do, the financial paperwork to draw up the actual sale from the owner to the employees. And some questions that typically come up from owners that are like, this is like the owner's resistance, are not knowing how much the business is worth, or getting into like haggling about with the employees about how much it's worth. So it's always worth, like, once you feel serious about it, it's worth getting evaluation, so people aren't like fighting about that afterwards. Am I going to be able to get the price that I want or need? So, if particularly in a retirement scenario, if somebody is planning on using the sale price as their retirement, they actually need to understand what they need out of it. How will workers capitalize the purchase? So this is kind of like what this cartoon is getting at. Is like, but I know what I pay you guys. How are you going to buy me out? And so it's really important to understand that this is like one of the reasons why Co-op Fund exists, is usually the employees are not the ones mostly financing a buyout. They might put in some like small token amount of equity so that they have some skin in the game, but usually there's, one or several loans from a cooperative lender, from the retiring owner, from some of the members or community members, or even some grant money or some government money. And the important thing that I mentioned early on is that any loan to the co-op is going to get underwritten, if you're working with a co-op friendly lender, is going to get underwritten based on the strength of the co-op. So there should never be anybody putting in more money than somebody else unless that's qualified as a member loan. There should never be people getting their own assets put at risk or having to sign for things using their individual credit scores. It really is about the strength of the co-op's plan. And another thing for owners, another pain point, is how much information am I going to need to share? So a lot of the times owners are just filing a Schedule C, and their personal and their business finances can be a little, like that. And so, the transition's going to go better if there's more information about the business's track record. Everybody's going to be better prepared. But this is part of the reason why we encourage people to put some of that financial transparency and open bookkeeping in place ahead of the transition. So you've worked out any of those funky financial things that might be going on in advance of the sale, and there's not this feeling of like, oh, I don't want people to know how much I take home or whatever. Catherine asks, can you contrast a co-op with a traditional business that allows employees to buy in as equity partners? Yeah, I mean, the main difference is that in a co-op, everyone has an equal equity stake. So everybody purchases one share for the same amount and is entitled to one vote. There's no differential power based on I own 50 shares and you own 5 shares, so I get 10 times the voting power and 10 times the profit. And also brains, sorry. And also that a employee-owned co-op is 100% employee-owned. So sometimes you'll see, like King Arthur Flour says on their bags, 100% employee company. That's because they're an ESOP, they're an employee stock ownership plan company, and ESOPs don't have to be 100% employee-owned. So in the case of a co-op, it's 100% owned by its employees. It's not like we're going to give them 30% and a seat on the board. So it's fundamentally more democratic, both in terms of governance and in terms of finances. I'm not going to get into this too much, but in case anybody likes to geek out on on capital stacks and deal structure, these are 4 examples from co-op conversions that CFNE has been involved with, and it's just to show you there are really different ways to structure where your capital comes from, and none of them rest heavily on the employees being able to put in a significant amount of their own assets. A lot of it might come from a community lender, or in the case of Real Pickles, community investments. So they did a direct public offering and raised a lot of money that way. Having people buy non-voting equity, community supporters buy non-voting equity shares and then earn a return on that. Island Employee Co-op's another interesting one. They're a chain of stores in the islands of Maine, and they actually had one of their vendors give them a significant loan because they were an important customer to them. So just to understand, there are a lot of different ways that you can do this depending on your situation. Okay, plug number 1. This is in the workbook, so you don't have to capture this information now, but there is, through Mass Growth Capital Corporation, there's free business assessments. So if you're involved with a business that's thinking about could worker ownership be feasible, you can meet for free with an advisor at Cooperative Development Institute, and they'll kind of look at the financial feasibility of the business, look at the management structure, look at the capacity of the employees, and help you think about, like, is it worth pursuing? Is it worth thinking about and learning about more? So that's an opportunity to look at if you're interested. And
they can be anywhere?
It has to be a Massachusetts-based business, so incorporated in Massachusetts.
Okay.
CDI works with people throughout the Northeast, but that particular free thing is it's Massachusetts funding, so yeah. But definitely, I have embarrassing conversations with business owners for businesses that I love all the time, where I'm like, "You're getting old, guy who owns the fish store that my kid loves. Do you have a plan for what's going to happen when you retire?" So you totally have these conversations with businesses that you care about and let them know that there are resources to help them think about succession planning. Even if it's not selling to their employees, just have a plan. Know that you're not going to have to just shut the doors and fire your employees and not get any money out of it. That's kind of the takeaway on that one. I know I'm going kind of fast. Any questions before I move on? Cool. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
See.
I'm sorry. Earlier you said that that when there was a community question about the contrasting a co-op with the equity partners. What was that phrase you used? Was it ESOP, EOP?
ESOP, ESOP, so Employee Stock Ownership Program. So a lot of the bigger companies that you see that say we're employee owned, like King Arthur Flour or Publix grocery store, they're an ESOP. So it's basically like a fancy retirement plan is what it is. They gift shares to their employees. It's not always 100%. There can be differential shares, but it is one way of accomplishing employee ownership. It's just there's not the democratic and equitable aspect is not baked in automatically, even though some of them are. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, management. So management is the thing that's most visible in running a business. And it's really how you're sharing information, how you're developing people, and helping them kind of move up and learn their jobs, but it's also power and decision making and how money's shared out. So, part of the transition to worker ownership is really creating regular practice for all of these things where everybody is involved, everybody has access to the information. There's a plan for how employees are going to be developed, how new members are going to be onboarded, and building actually like a social fabric within the organization where the business exists to meet the members' needs, the employees' needs, not just to earn a profit. This is another little geeky thing, but there's kind of two theories of management. And one of them is like people need to be goaded into doing work because nobody really wants to work because people are lazy. And the other is people like feeling like they've created something. Like at the landscaping co-op, everybody at the end of the day was like, I like going home tired at the end of the day and knowing that I made something beautiful and that people appreciate me. And so, one of the things you have to tease out in doing a management transition is, getting over that kind of like capitalist head trash that people need a boss to tell them what to do and they need to be motivated by like carrots and sticks rather than being given a stake in the business. And so plug number 2 is we're running, again, in partnership with Cooperative Development Institute, a participatory management initiative. And we've done this for the last 3 years. And it gets, I think, better every time. It's a virtual, some live, some asynchronous learning opportunity to learn about democratic management practices and sort of restorative HR, kind of, and also financial transparency and open book management. So again, it's geared toward folks in Massachusetts. If it's interesting to you and you're outside of Massachusetts, I invite you to apply. You just, because of funding sources, it's going to be first priority to Massachusetts folks. But really good opportunity to just, create more investment in your business, work on your systems, involve your people. Or if you're in already a cooperative workplace, to strengthen those systems. And last is governance. So governance is kind of like the least visible because owners get to make all the decisions. But it's really that big picture piece of what are our values? What are we about? What are we trying to do here? And also all the responsibility of making sure that we're, paying our taxes, abiding by the law, if the law is just, developing our people, looking out for shifts in the environment that might negatively impact the business or for business opportunities. And one of the things that I see happen a lot is, mature co-ops kind of can fall down on the job on this a little bit. It really takes constant reinvestment in making sure that people know how to make decisions together and tolerate conflict together and have those conversations in good ways. Let's see. Not sure why this is doing this, but there we go. So this is another way of sort of looking at what is governance, and it's just thinking about what are decisions that need to not just be made by your managers. And in a co-op, that is what's going to impact all of the members, what's going to really change the direction of the business itself. Is it going to sort of tie up resources for a long time or personnel for a long time? So things like your vision and mission, taking on new debt, At the landscaping co-op, we had this issue where a lot of people got laid off for the winter, and they'd go and they'd like do hardwood flooring or wash dishes or like whatever. And they were like, we really need to be able to just work for the co-op over the winter and not get all these side jobs under the table. And so we had a big conversation with all of the owners about, do we want to do snow plowing? It's hard, it's dangerous, it's expensive, but it would let us employ people through the winter. So that's, just one example of something that it was like a major shift in direction. It was going to commit a lot of our resources and be risky. So that was a decision that we had to all take together. So this is just another little kind of tool that's in your workbook. You don't have to do this right now, but a well-functioning co-op is going to have sort of a balance of leadership capacities that are about running a business effectively and running a democratic organization effectively. Because at the end of the day, the co-op exists to meet its members' needs through the business. So the business has to be, successful to continue to meet people's needs and, let them grow and gain wealth and grow professionally. So, it can be helpful when you're starting up something, either as a new leader or as an owner, to just think about like, what's my comfort zone? What are my strong suits? Is there somebody else in the organization that complements that? Are there professional development things that I need to do to kind of like beef up one area or the other? So, like a lot of owners are real strong on the business, like take all the risks, like go out there and network their butts off, but may not be really great at sharing power or communicating with people or like being nurturing. It's just a little thing to take stock of. Before I move on, any questions on the kind of three-legged stool of ownership transition? All right, sweet. So this is just kind of the steps.
I had a quick question around like when you were talking about like decision making and like how important it is for workers to know how to practice decision making, but also practice conflict or be familiar with it.
Yeah.
What type of like tools or trainings or practices have you witnessed that have like allowed people to like better engage in conflict, like generative conflict?
I'm actually going to stop sharing because I want to see everybody's faces. Some of the stuff like in the participatory management initiative, there's just stuff about like, how do you give feedback and receive feedback, and how do you notice like what are your personal triggers and things that get on your nerves that make you kind of go from that good adaptive zone into like the red zone of like, stop right there, I cannot talk to you anymore. But also, like at the landscaping co-op, we literally, culturally, conflict is really hard. I'll speak for myself as a Latina. It's like not something, especially in a male-dominated organization, it was not something where I really wanted to like push people and stuff. But also just culturally in general, like we're very communitarian. And so sometimes people would like know that something was being done wrong or not in accordance with our values or just even just procedurally wrong and like dangerous, and they didn't want to speak up. And so we literally had somebody come in and do some training around how to have effective conversations, and that conflict is positive and conflict is a way to grow and move more toward unity. It doesn't have to be this like scary, bad, disrespectful thing. And, one of the examples that they gave was like, okay, imagine that you and your buddy, your co-owner, are on a job site and he's planting a tree and he goes and he puts it in the ground down. Would you say something? He's putting it in with the leaves in the ground and the roots up in the air. Would you say something? And it's like, it's kind of a ridiculous example, but it took that for people to kind of have the aha moment of like, Right. We have people who are taking risks and doing things unsafely or doing things that we know are wasting time or not what we agreed to. And it's as foolish as putting the tree and green side down. Um, and again, it's another of those things that it takes constant investment because it is very countercultural. We're in a very hierarchical, very, heteropatriarchal society. And so learning how to have generative conflict, especially across differences, takes constant, practice. Was that helpful?
We can also just welcome every member with a book, like Adrienne Marie Brown's book.
Yes.
To be part of it.
Totally.
Along those lines, I'm also curious, how to empower your new employee owners, because for me, it's like if you have experienced hierarchical systems where you have been devalued for so much of your life and your input has been neglected or ignored, it can be difficult to suddenly start making decisions for an organization or believing that you have the power to do that. And it's not any fault of any one individual for not believing that they have that or using that power that's newly at their disposal. But I'm curious, also in part of your trainings, what work is effective or what strategies have you seen work in terms of really getting people to instill a new belief in themselves, that they have the knowledge, they have the experiences, and they have just the worth of being able to make decisions that could empower and ensure the best of their organization.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And the flip side of it too is there are a lot of people who really lack confidence, and think I can't be an owner, I can't do the things an owner needs to do. And there are also people whose idea of what they've received about being an owner is really whacked out because it's about power over, because that's the experience they've had as employees, right? And so it's also, how do you keep people from kind of revisiting their trauma on their colleagues? And it's not about a one-shot training. It's really about the culture and learning about how to do adaptive supervision and kind of coaching management type of stuff, or coaching supervision type of stuff, where you're really taking each person where they're at and saying, what are the ways you want to plug in? What are your skills that you want to bring to bear? What are areas you want to grow? Reflecting that back with them, creating a culture where giving and receiving feedback is just part of, it's like breathing. It's not tense, it's not scary, it's just how we all get better together. But again, it's constant work and it's culture building. It's not it's not an easy thing. But for sure, if you don't have a good onboarding plan where you're at least starting out by trying to give people a level playing field of, hey, here's how stuff works. Here's your rights and responsibilities. Here's how we communicate things. Here's how you know what's going on in meetings. Having prospective members who might be employees who are candidates, having them attend a board meeting before they become members so they understand what types of decisions are being made. And, even as basic stuff as starting with making sure people have the right information, and know how to provide input, is a great start. But also investing in, your supervisors or in peer feedback or however it is that's happening, that people are coaching each other.
I have a question around, I guess I've always been curious about co-ops. I work for the largest trans organization in Washington. And the idea of co-op, I don't know how much are people really building wealth individually, right? And what does that look like over time? How does how does your organization work with organizations and policymakers to also address the need to have basic needs met as a baseline, right? Because we can provide opportunities for our community, but as long as our basic needs are being commodified, communities will always be in poverty, right?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, you're asking a like really big systemic question that I don't know that I'm completely equipped to answer. I mean, part of it is that we don't operate in isolation, right? We are part of numerous overlapping movements. And so, there are people who specifically their thing is to work on policy or to work grassroots advocating for justice. And we're trying to sort of be in solidarity and realize that there are points of connection, and to the extent that co-ops can be tools for them, try and resource them. So like right now we just launched a fellowship program where we have folks who are coming from base building organizations that have kind of identified, we know co-ops are part of the solution, but we don't really know how to do it yet, and helping resource them to be able to do co-ops in a way that's culturally appropriate for their community and their culture. So, whether that's Central American women without documentation coming out of domestic violence situations, forming a cleaning or a tortilleria co-op so that they can work and provide for their families without work authorization. Or, I mean, I can't really go through all the examples, but, basically, we believe that there are a lot of ways that people are best suited to meet their own needs by collaborating rather than having somebody come in from a think tank and like give them a solution. But it's about being in relationship and really trying to listen to each other and resource each other, I think. I know that's super like woo woo, but it's
No,
what we
that's
got.
great. I just want to have one question. Does your organization work with like utility co-ops that provide that help provide where folks deliver like telecommunications, water, electricity?
Because we're only a $40 million fund, and our loan limit is like $2 million for an individual loan, we're really not at that scale. It would be cool. But we're really more working with like individual solar installer companies or weatherization companies, rather than the big infrastructure. So yeah, and we can get a certain amount done through collaboration with other lenders. So like I see Betty from Boston Impact Initiatives on the call, and we definitely collaborate with them and with UGMA, and with bigger conventional lenders like National Cooperative Bank, to do those bigger deal sizes, but not at the like regional infrastructure level. That would be a dream. I want to just pull us back for a couple more minutes. James, can I get a time check? I actually don't know how long I get to go, but I'm real close to the end.
Yeah, I was going to say like 10.
Perfect. That would be perfect. Yeah, so going back to how do employee-owned transitions actually work? What are the steps? I'm going to just caveat that this is an oldish slide. It's like probably 5 years old, and we know inflation's a thing, so like there's that little plus sign next to all of these dollars. But it'll give you a sense of range, which is basically that, as you get farther into a transition, your need for spending for professional help increases. So, starting out with the explore phase is just like, what is worker ownership? Could we do this? Is there interest? What would it look like? And you can do a lot of that for free through talking to people like me. And I mean, within certainly the Massachusetts ecosystem, and even in the Northeast, there are a lot of people who've done worker-owned conversions, and who are happy to just, the co-op space is very friendly. Like, people will talk to you for free a lot. For a yard and a half, I definitely got a lot of free materials from like Equal Exchange and Namaste Solar and stuff. People are very good community citizens. So that explore phase, you can get through on the cheap. Assess is where you actually sort of like do a feasibility study and look at your financials and look at your market and see if there's some there. Can you get the deal amount that you want to meet everybody's needs? Is it a good deal for the employees? I mean, that's really important, is not to, the wisdom in the employee ownership world is like, don't sell people bad businesses. So really making sure that the business model is strong. Structure is when you say, okay, yes, we do want to do this. We have a willing buyer, willing seller. Let's work out the details of, is it going to be a cooperative corporation? Is it going to be an LLC with democratic operating agreements, whatever? And figuring out how are we going to accomplish each of those three transitions, the ownership, the management, and the governance, in an organized fashion that's not going to cause upheaval. Because one of the things with an existing business is you have clients, you have workers that you need to keep paying, you have clients you need to keep happy. You can't have everything just kind of like go crazy for a few months while you're doing the transition. So that structure piece is really important to do in a planful way. And then completing is when, you actually do the thing, changes hands legally, financially, in terms of who's running day-to-day operations, and having your board meeting and making the decisions to move things forward. And then support is ongoing. And I mean, for years and years, because then the co-op's it's like a real democratic business. And, often there's that initial phase of training that folks need to learn those ownership skills and those conflict skills and maybe even some management skills. But there's also just care and feeding of, okay, we made it through our first year. We made a profit. How do we figure out what to do with the profit? Okay, let's, talk with a cooperative accountant and learn how to do that. So the support needs are ongoing, and just something that I, as somebody who works with a lot of mature co-ops, put in a plug that there are a lot of wonderful co-op service providers, and they're worth every penny. I see Betty's question. How long does it take to do a full transition? 2 to 5 years. That's a really fair assessment. Yeah. A lot of it just depends on the condition of the business going into it. So this is one of the reasons why we're so excited about things like the Participatory Management Initiative, is that the more that businesses can build in some of that information sharing and financial transparency and participatory management kind of culture on the front end, it eases the transition a lot to where, ideally you're like operating as a co-op in everything but the official legal structure before you actually change hands, so that the last thing to do is actually do the financial and legal piece. But it's just sometimes you'll have somebody who maybe they have health issues and they need to retire on a time frame, and then maybe that support phase is a lot more robust, and you actually have an interim general manager that's stepping in for a year or two to help make sure that management piece transitions cleanly when the owner has to get out quickly. So it can vary a lot, but yeah, I think 2 to 5 years is a really fair average. Other questions on this? So this last one is just like, as I said, I have a lot of early stage conversations with people who are like, I own an automotive garage and I want to sell to my employees. What would that look like? And these are kind of some of the questions that I would ask people early on, just to make sure that they're like thinking realistically about what they need to have in place. And it's not an exhaustive list, but like any one of these, if you don't have it, you need to kind of work on it before you do a transition, because they're things that are kind of make or break, like kind of go or no go issues. So, and for a lot of businesses, it's their financial systems. I helped a lot of conventional businesses with their PPP loans, and it's amazing how many people are like not up to date on their taxes, or they don't have good financial record keeping, much less the ability to share that with anybody else in their business. So that, again, is another reason to invest in some of this free financial assessment and training, because those systems are critical when you get into having to share that information with other stakeholders. So that is it. Thank you all for bearing with that, and for all of your wonderful questions and observations. And there's, some ways to get in touch with us, stuff about the PMI. It's all in your workbook. It'll all be on the slides when those go out. And yeah, thank you.